Hello, Paul from Four Wheel Drive here, and today this video is about the version 2 motor system and the cables and what you need to know with putting it together, doing it correctly, and how to avoid any damage and misalignment. So we're going to go through this step by step. This is not a video about how to set up your entire four-wheel drive. This is just about the considerations relative to version 2 motor. So first things first, the stator. We have the plug. We have the O-ring groove that is around the plug and the four 4mm holes that the puck attaches to. The biggest single thing you want to make sure you never forget when you are putting a cable on is that the red O-ring that comes off is installed on your plug like that. That red O-ring seats neatly into this machined lip and creates a seal. Now, in order to have a perfect seal, we also recommend applying some of the four-wheel drive battery grease. Now, you don't need to squirt the grease into the pins in this connector. It's actually preferable that you don't, to reduce resistance. The reason this is slightly contradicting itself between us telling you have to put it on the main housing plug is if water ever got on the main housing plug, like you dripped water in there off your hands by accident, and then you plugged it in and you used it and it didn't have grease, you really don't want to damage the pins in your main housing. That is significantly more difficult to resolve than if you accidentally damaged a cable that's replaceable. So it's more about an insurance policy, making sure that you take no chances with your main unit. But my recommendation is if you put it on the outside, the O-ring is going to seal perfectly and you will get slightly more performance out of your system, as there's a slight reduction in resistance from the power coming from your unit into the motor. So I simply apply a small bead just to the cavity around the plug. Like so. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, but I've put a small bead around the circumference of the plug. So then it comes to selecting the cable. So I'm going to use a 15cm. Actually, I'm going to use 20. I've changed my mind. I'm going to put that one on. So things I want to check, I want to make sure that there is no debris or sand or grit in this plug here. I want to make sure it's clean. And I want to make sure my O-ring is on there. In this instance, they're both on there. I also want to make sure the pins are straight and not bent. Then to install it, I grab the stator, I turn it upside down, and I push it on like so. And I want to push it down with a lot of force so that it's flat and against the machined face of the stator. If it is slightly proud, like so, and it's not supported, the pins will move. This will get pulled flush when you put the puck on anyway, but just push it down like that. The reason pushing it down is important is when you grab the puck element, it makes it easier for you to align the bolts. So when I put the puck on, I want to make sure that this opening is facing the top and it sits on like that. There is the supplied M4 by 16mm screws or bolts, and they go in as you would expect into the front here. Like that. Now, another important step with the 2.5mm Allen key that is provided in the kit, I just grab it by the shaft. So there's minimal torque applied, and you just want to start each bolt like that. So that was easy for me to start each bolt with just finger pressure, which means the threads of these bolts are tapping into the stator taps nice and smoothly. Do not do up one aggressively, which then can put the entire puck on a tilt, and then try and do up the other three. You want to do up all four of them evenly, and the way you know you're doing it right is when you can just do it with finger finger tension on the shaft of the driver. So there we go. I've actually done up all 4 and I only used finger tension here. Now that I've done that, I can then go around and do them up with a bit more intent to ensure that the puck is fully clamping against the fascia of the stator. Now we have what looks like a normal motor, and that's because technically it is, except for it's just version 2. So the process of installing this onto your Gen 2 is now the same. You would apply some grease to your terminals here, install your plug, put your motor in, and obviously I need to put the bolts in to hold that in place, and I would install my M410s as per normal into here. A cool little tip when installing that is I like to take the rotor off so it's out of the way. So when it comes to putting the M410s into my main unit, I have total freedom to put my hands above. And again, the same trick applies. I should be able to thread these bolts into the main unit with just finger pressure, like so. And again, once they've started, then I know I can do up the bolts with confidence that I'm not stripping or cross-threading the thread that goes into the main unit because the bolt's already been started. So that's done. I can then simply install the stator like normal, and you put the puck screws in as you do with the motor installation, and you put all 3 in. So it's the same process as normal, except now you do not have to worry about cable length. You've got the cable options and you can chop and change as much as you like. Again, it's still very important to make sure that the cable is well supported and not under excessive tension. For example, if I was to pull this pod up too far, and you can see this cable now has too much tension on it. You're putting a lot of force right on this plug exit. So make sure that your pod is correctly positioned so that the cable wants to push into the mast and has a nice continuous bow shape down the bottom, which means there's not a pulling force on the plug. The other massive benefit with version 2 motor is if the plug ever gets damaged, which some people have had happen, and you can see that on the forums, when the motor tick-tocks backwards and forwards because the plug has been damaged internally, typically due to the excessive force on these plugs. When people have this pushed too far up and it's all tight here and then they tape around it, it actually damages the plug internally. Now we have the opportunity to simply replace a very basic piece of cable as opposed to the entire stator. So that's a really good bonus from the repair and maintenance side of things, that you can simply replace that. The version 2 motor also uses M4 by 16 bolts. They are slightly longer than the original puck bolts, which are M4 by 10. So please use the correct bolt supplied, and you can use the standard 2.5mm Allen key. Last little silly things, obviously don't foil with the tag on. You can take that off. And the taping of your cable on your mast is actually easier now. We don't recommend taping over this section here. Just simply tape over the exposed bit of cable that is on the trailing edge of your mast. So that's a slightly easier thing. You will notice a drag reduction as this segment here is a lot smaller, narrower, and not as high. So the actual volume of this has dropped by about at least 60% relative to the last one. So it is actually a noticeable improvement. So tape it on as you normally would. Have the nice curvature here so there's not excessive force on this plug exit, and you shouldn't have any issues and you should be out in the water in no time. That's how it's done. Get out there, explore all the new options that you now have with the different cable lengths. Try different lengths for surfing, downwinding, upwinding, winging, prone foiling, e-foiling, whatever it is. I encourage you to try different cable lengths because they do feel differently in the water. Install's pretty straightforward. get out there, have fun, and from the team from 4 Wheel Drive, thanks for your support. Cheers.